Okay, whenever you're ready.
I just got to find my packet. Okay, I'd like to call the Plan Commission meeting to order on Tuesday, March 28th, 2023 at 5:30 PM. Janelle, could you please take roll call?
Bertle,
Here.
Bell,
Here.
Gretzmacher,
Here.
Schmitz,
Here.
Champeau,
Here.
Kane,
Here.
and Zashki.
Here.
Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
I so move.
Second.
Motion by Gretzmacher, second by Bell. All in favor, respond with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Is there a motion to approve the February 28th, 2023 meeting minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Was that Zashki?
Yes.
Second by Champeau. All those in favor respond with an aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Do we have anybody joining us tonight that would like to address the Plan Commission on any particular issue? Tricia, please state your name and address, please.
Hi, my name is Tricia Pleiss, and I own a condo at 10692 Gulf Road in Sister Bay. And I just would like to see if I could address the board about a possible text amendment to allow, I'm one of the condo owners in the R2 district that we've been granted the license to have a short-term rental. And I'm one of the people that are being proposed that we won't be able to do that anymore. So I would like to see if it's an appropriate time to request an amendment from the board on that.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else care to speak?
Karen, you're next.
Thanks. Did you say Karen?
Go ahead.
Hello?
We can hear you.
Internet. You can hear me? Great. Thank you. I'm sorry. It's kind of keeps coming in and out. Thanks for the opportunity for us to address this commission. We really appreciate it. My name is Karen Barrett, and I live at 8608 East Moonlight Bay Drive in Bailey's Harbor. I have lived and worked in Door County for nearly 30 years. I did purchase a cottage at 10444 North Woods Drive in Sister Bay in 2017, and I currently use as a vacation rental. Although it is not in the R1 zoning and is not directly affected at this time, I would like to express my concern that R2 zoned owners are being discriminated against. It was agreed by the Plan Commission members at prior meetings that the 15 current STR license owners within that R2 zoning have received licenses and are in good standing, but that when the Plan Commission began to review zoning, it was determined that R2 zoning did not allow short-term rentals. And that is even though it was agreed by commission members at a number of commission meetings that the owners had been told they could have short-term rentals there. Now we hear about a few other developments that are coming that will be an issue as well, but mostly I want to talk about preferential treatment. There apparently is an agreement with a couple of the condo developers or some of the developers that came about, and so they will be exempted from this banning. Doesn't seem like a good thing to do. According to legal opinion, the village is not able to determine that zoning in R2 precludes short-term rentals. Unfortunately, right now, there's a great deal of talk that people are pursuing legal action. I am concerned that the village will continue to discriminate against short-term rentals. Certainly, there has been talk in the past few meetings of special community development taxes placed on short-term rentals, along with other fees to cover village newly determined needs. These fees will be on top of the large sums already received from taxes placed on short-term rentals and received by Sister Bay and other Door County communities. Again, it is not legal to tax a certain group of business owners who are legally licensed, nor is the commission acting in good faith. I recommend that the commission approve all R2 zone short-term rentals that are currently licensed in Sister Bay until future legal rulings are obtained about this zoning concern. I apologize for my internet. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Who would like to be next?
I would like to go. Ron
Go ahead,
Fritz.
Ron.
Yes. I would make a short plea to the board that you revisit your R2 rating on your code. I'm from Scotland, and we have rented since 1996. And we have never been told that there was a code that we should not rent. And we have paid our taxes. We have had people in the unit 11 to 13 to 15 weeks that help support the village. And I am asking you to do the same thing that you did with another unit. In one of the meetings, you mentioned the fact that you made concessions to a development for another person. And I am asking you to do the same thing with Scotland and the rest of our 9 or 10 units that are being blanked out. That's all I'm going to say.
Thank you, Ron. Someone else care to speak?
Yeah, can you hear me? This is Gary Wisa.
Yes, can't see you.
Yeah, I don't know, my camera is just not working right now. For some reason, I can't seem to get the video up. But am I allowed to speak?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I guess I just would like to address this community development fee that appears to be tied to the short-term rentals. So in the last 3 years, I've built 3 condos, Shoreview Condominium 2, and then Beachview Condo Rentals. And it seems like there's been talk to tie the community development fee specifically to short-term rentals, which seems extremely discriminatory and a little egregious, that this is a fee that only short-term rental owners should pay. You know, it appears like it's another tax. It's death by a dozen taxes. If you look at what the visitors pay when they come into the village, you know, besides their rental fee, they've got a state tax. They've got a Door County's tourism tax. They've got a village tax, which includes a 0.5% premier resort tax. I'd like to hear a little bit more about what that's being used for. And now you want to add another tax to it. You know, it's going to get to the point where people who want to come visit are going to choose other communities because they're getting taxed to death. And this seems to be something that if you're going to impose some sort of community development tax, that it's shared by all businesses, including hotels, motels, restaurants, bars, gas station owners. You know, why just short-term rental operators? So that is a concern, and I believe it may be found to be illegal, you know, once it would get to the legal system. And I guess I'd like more color on the logic behind targeting short-term rental owners from the committee with regard to that tie-in specifically to short-term rentals and the community development fee.
Under comments and correspondence, because we don't specifically know what is going to be said, we cannot have a back and forth conversation. So we may put that on a future agenda so we can just listen and notate your concerns at this time. Julie?
Just to clarify for the record, there is no community development fee or tax that has even been discussed or imposed on short-term rentals, just so the Plan Commission is aware of that.
Thank you.
May I say something? Denise?
Could you clarify at the end of the last meeting?
I'm sorry, the chair just said we won't engage in back and forth. That was just a clarified comment that was made, but certainly give me a call tomorrow and I can help you with that. Okay.
Okay, then Denise, I would,
Your name and
Yes, sir.
address?
Janet Slater, 5502 North Shower Road. I
What
thought at
town?
the end, I thought at the end of the last plan commit, whoops. I thought at the end of the last plan commission, there was a recommendation for a community development tax that came out of that for staff to research it. So I think that's where that came from. But I wanted to clear up and get some more information kind of on the theme of Gary Wace's comment. It seems that there's some misinformation about the volume of short-term rentals in relation to residences. We've heard from a number of people that their STRs are there's as many short-term rentals as there are residents. We looked up census data and it appears that there's about 1,060 households in Sister Bay. Half of those are residents that are both owner occupied and renter occupied. And then there's 99 short-term rentals according to staff notes. And then we have, that would leave us about 420 seasonal residents. So you have STRs at about 10%, residents 51, and seasonal residents at about 40%. So I'm worried that there's some misinformation. And if those numbers aren't the right numbers, they're based on 2020 census, we'd certainly appreciate understanding what you consider those numbers to be, because of this sharing with other people that STRs are somehow, overpopulating the area. That does not appear to be the case. And I think when we talk about the concern that Plan Commission has expressed about affordable housing, if you look at STRs being 10% and seasonal residents being 40%, when you talk about the impact on affordable housing, it's probably stronger in the other two sectors than it is in for a group that's 10%. So we just want to be sure that we all are using the same facts and would be interested in hearing your facts on those at a future meeting. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yes, Denise, I would like to say something further.
Go ahead, Ron.
What you don't know probably is you got Skoglund tagged as being an R2 situation. And I understand that. But what you don't know is that 2 years ago, they took a vote in the condo association, and the condo association tried to vote 3 times and could not get a consensus. Now, the reason for that was when all of those condos were built and the paperwork went in for it, the Rays and the Ericksons and whoever did the work acknowledged the fact that those units could be rented. And when we took the vote, that was the main point in purchasing those condos, was the fact that we could rent, and it was a sales pitch. And that basically is why most of those people bought those units. Now, they don't ever say too much. When we took the vote, we could not get a unanimous decision to stop rentals. I just wanted to let you know that.
Thank you, Ron. Anyone else? Tricia?
Could I just add one last comment to that the condo that I own and another individual that is in the R2 district, we do have bylaws in place with our HOA that we do allow rentals, and we're all very neighborly and good about it. And that is one of the reasons that I did buy the property. It's a family vacation place, and I only really rent it maybe 10 weeks a month, but without that rental, I wouldn't be able to afford the condo. So had I not been led to believe that this was a legal thing to do, I would have made a different choice, because this could be a financial hardship for my family and I if we're not allowed to continue to rent. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Denise, in the answer to that young lady, and we have talked, you're taking away income from people that have dealt with these condos. Ourselves was 29 years. That is not fair. And you're making concessions to people that have just built developments that haven't paid taxes on any of those properties, as far as I know. And they will, but is it fair for you to do something like that and disallow someone that's been in the business for almost 30 years and paid taxes to the town, brought in people to the town, hired people from the town and from the surrounding areas to update the units for your benefit? I don't think that's fair. And I told Rob that the other day when I did his interview. And I'm sorry, but I don't want this village to go to court. I don't want a litigation. All I want is fairness. And fairness is let the condo association do their own business. Don't take it away from us. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Denise, this is Gary. Could I just add one more comment?
Go ahead, Gary.
So the tie-in to transient rentals is another concern. When I hear people make comments that there's not enough housing for transient rentals because of the STRs. And I can't imagine one short-term rental agreement that the village has that would be an appropriate facility for transient rentals. So it seems like the connection between those two is absolutely false. You're talking about people that own condos, higher end condos, that are renting them out for far more than any transient rental could ever work for. And you've got a new development going on up on top of the hill that is supposed to address some of that. I think, if the village were to work on opportunities for developers to create more housing for transient rentals, that is a better angle to take versus penalizing the current short-term rental operators who, yes, we do pay taxes, lots of them, and we bring a lot of value to the village with the amount of new business that comes into the business. I wish more business owners would see it that way rather than say, well, you're taking away from our transient rentals. If there's a small house somewhere, business owners could compete to purchase those just as well as somebody that had the intention of using it as their own residence and then also renting it out a few times during the year to help compensate for the taxes and the ongoing holding costs. So I guess we would like to see more evidence of the transient rental connection to the short-term rental issue. So, I keep, again, it's a transient rentals, it's a community development fee. Everything seems to be targeting toward the condo owners who are renting out their units to cover some of their costs. Most of these people, they don't come up there every weekend or every week. They might only be up there 3, 4, or 5 times during the summer. So to help offset some of those costs and offer an opportunity for more people to visit the village and participate in the growth and bring in more tax revenue, that shouldn't be penalized. That's all I have to say.
Thanks, Gary. Anyone else that we've missed? Going once, going twice. Okay. I would like to say something as an individual under comments and correspondence. I would like to share my personal opinion on the flip side of STRs. I am not saying that STRs are the sole reason we have a housing crisis here in Sister Bay and Northern Door and the country as a whole, but they are part of the problem. They are not part of the solution. I am well aware of the STR owners' opinions about how their properties are enhancing the business community here in Sister Bay and throughout Northern Door. But not every resident of Sister Bay enjoy STRs, and I have heard from them also. Some of you talk about that your homes would not be conducive for year-round housing, but I beg to differ. Like many of you, I receive a report periodically from real estate offices showing the sold market report. The last one I received, I would like to share some of that data. And this data is from April 2022 through December of 22. A home on Trillium Lane was listed for $485,000. It sold for $555,000, $70,000 over. Right across the street from me on Maple Drive, the home was listed for $297,000. It sold for $490,000, $193,000 over. Another home about a block down the road from me on Maple was listed at $429,000. It actually sold for $418,000, $11,000 lower. On North Spring, there was a home that was listed for $249,000, sold for $275,000, $26,000 over, but the home was only 600 square feet. On South Spring, there was a home listed for $345,000, sold for $446,000, $101,000 over asking. Cherrywood Lane, listed for $365,000, sold for $401,000, $36,000 over. Fieldcrest, listed for $499,000, sold for $653,000, $154,000 over. Birchwood, $470,000, sold for $526,000, $56,000 over. And Forest Lane, listed for $449,000, sold for $464,000, just $15,000 over. Every one of these properties now belongs to someone who lives in Heartland, Wisconsin, Pulaski, Wisconsin, Grafton, Wisconsin, Mequon, Wisconsin, Mokina, Illinois, Excelsior, Minnesota, excuse me, and Geneva, Illinois. Of the Inland Residential Property Sold Market Report, there were 23 homes sold in Sister Bay during this time period. Of those 23, 8 have received STR licenses and 2 are pending. And the other 13, we will wait and see what happens. So far, that means 44% of the houses are no longer house residents. I think that's a staggering number. Homes that used to be rented out annually are now becoming STRs and displacing even more people, causing an even larger shortage. As an example, the house next to Husby's was rented out to locals year-round for years, and now the new owner has turned it into an STR and displaced those 3 people. I'd like to share my personal story with you. The gas station I own with my sister has been in business for 39 years. We started out small, the gas station part being only 1/5 of the entire building. And as times changed, we kept expanding to meet the needs of the community. We have relied on local people to hire, and for the most part have been very lucky fulfilling the positions to be open from 6:30 in the morning until midnight. But we are currently in a position where we are losing one part-time person who is moving out of the county and a full-time person because they cannot find housing here in Northern Door. So they have moved to Sturgeon Bay, where housing is a little better to find, but not by much. No one has applied for the 60 hours we need covered. So what should we do? Sell? Reduce our open hours by 60 hours a week? Work ourselves to death? You tell me. Yes, Ron and Joe, my sister and I have been trying to purchase a home that we can offer to an employee at a rent that would nowhere cover the mortgage. We recently put in an offer for a house that was assessed at $140,000. Fair market value was $170,000. The list price was $389,000. There were 30 showings in 2 days in 7 offers, including ours. One of the offers had an escalating clause in it. Our offer was not accepted. The house sold for $420,000 cash with no inspection or conditions, most likely to an out-of-town buyer. So yes, we try, but what local can compete with cash sales and above asking offers? I would like to think that being part of a community should involve more than our village board being money driven. What about the quality of life we all would like to have? There is a vicious circle that no one seems to be talking about. The less housing there is, the less employees there are to staff any particular business. The businesses that are able to find J1s and the hoops that they have to go through to staff their businesses is ridiculous. And that is just a short-term solution. Some STR owners talk about the money that their guests spend in the community. I cannot deny that. But the busier a business is, the more staff they may need. And where do we all find them? Poaching is a new common practice because there are not enough locals to staff our restaurants, bars, gas stations, retail, lawn maintenance companies, etc. And people are not moving here for those jobs because there is no housing. So what do? We work excessive hours just to keep the shifts covered and pray for Thanksgiving to arrive. We don't have a quality of life. We don't get to enjoy everything in our own backyard. We are always catering to those who have more, and then have to listen to how long the wait is at a restaurant, or that the service wasn't as friendly as what it should be. Hey, everybody, we are exhausted. Someone in a letter said that our year-round businesses needed all the help they can get. It's not the business that we need employees with housing. I have a friend who is married. They both work in the service industry, and he also has a side business of painting. They have been here for years, but have finally lost hope of ever owning their own home in Northern Door. They will be moving out of the county sometime after this season, searching for a new dream of home ownership someplace else. How many others will eventually face this reality? And at what point does it all come crashing down? To circle back around, the village is investing in housing. It has been one of their top priorities for years. They have sold the Housing Trust 10 lots to build on, which is deed restriction and will be sold to locals. The village put in the infrastructure to the tune of $600,000 for the Shoals low-income 45 units. They purchased the Wilsey 52 acres and has plans to put workforce housing on that. But all the STR permit fees, Pratt money, and room tax money is nowhere near enough to cover the costs of infrastructure, road repairs, parks, let alone workforce housing that we must fund as a result of housing leaving the market. Again, these are my opinions and my experiences. I welcome a solution to find a balance between locals having housing and the STR industry, but no one is recommending a solution. I thank you for listening and maybe seeing a different perspective on how the rest of us live. Janelle, did you want to highlight any correspondence that we have in the packet?
Could I speak again? This is Karen.
Nope, it's closed. Janelle?
Okay, there were
Thank
copies of emails. Did you want something, Rob?
Oh, I was, since Denise made a comment, I was gonna make one, but if she said it's closed, it's closed.
Okay, so there were copies of emails that were received and those were included in the packets from Catherine Vitale, Laurel McDermott Harf and Kurt Harf, Ron and Joe, Gary Wisa, and Karen Barrett. In her email, Ms. Vitale points out that officials in Galena, Illinois have placed a limit on the number of short-term rental licenses that are issued and suggests that village officials also consider that option. Mr. and Mrs. Harp indicate that they are concerned that there are already plenty of hotels, condos, motels, and VRBOs in Sister Bay and don't want to see the area become nothing but rentals. Ron and Joe state that they are perplexed by the statement that has been made that short-term rentals cause issues with the provision of affordable housing. And they also indicate, where were the Sister Bay buyers when housing went up for sale, and why didn't someone purchase a house to do that? In conclusion, they state, if the board can find it in their heart to change the code to reflect rentals allowed, it would simplify things and not cost a dime to anyone, but still bring in monies to the village. Mr. Wisa indicates that it has recently come to his attention that one of the reasons for the attack on STRs is that such practices have a negative effect on the provision of affordable housing. He does not believe the STR operators are the problem and requests that the commission members focus on the positive impact STRs have on the village as a whole. In conclusion, he states Sister Bay has been a leader in development in Door County and is an example of what other towns aspire to become and look like as a preferred tourist destination. Continue to be that leader in municipal development and not radically restrict STRs. Rather, look at ways to offer opportunities to developers to build future affordable housing using proceeds from STR taxes and fees. Ms. Barrett indicates that for decades there have been short-term rentals in Door County, and she believes several businesses have relied on the income that is generated as the result of the provision of that type of lodging. She has owned an STR in Sister Bay since 2017 and believes she can speak for the majority of STR owners when saying that they are ready and able to continue to encourage responsible and money-spending guests to stay in Sister Bay. In conclusion, Ms. Barrett states, please consider making R2 zoned areas STR friendly and take another look at the importance of STRs in Sister Bay.
Thank you, Janelle. Item number 6A, final plan review and draft development agreement, boat dealership facility, Scandia Marine, also known as Beacon Marine, or the boathouse maybe now, I'm not quite sure. Julie?
Sure. Let me make sure I've got, so we reviewed this last month and we wanted them to come back with some more information and some changes. And they did make those changes we requested and provided the additional information. So real quick, we were a little concerned about the accent walls, about that maybe they were aluminum and we don't allow metal walls. So we asked them to provide a copy of the siding. And what they did is they brought in, it's a panel, and I think 4 of our members actually came in and looked at it, but there's a photo in here. What it is it's a foam panel wrapped in aluminum, and it's got a stucco finish on it. So it's really a stucco finish, I guess. It's pretty durable. The color that they gave us is actually gray. I have sand on here, but it's actually called gray. And then they added accent walls to break up the walls because we thought the walls were too long. They were too monotonous. So what they did is they added wood sections to break up the monotony. And that's in those plans that you see. And you can see in the photo in the staff report that would be broken up with a wood grain tile, so to speak, or wood grain composite. We want to see more landscaping, so they did add that. They also offered to put in trees along the north line. They added that to the landscape plan. And then, yeah, if you look at in my staff report, what's item number 4 on page 2, you can see how they broke up the wall. And I do have the colored schematic here that I could hold up, but it's also in your packet in what appears as an attachment to this file. page 27 in your packet would show a color rendering of what that would look like with that broken up wall. We asked them, the code allows 3,000 lumens. We asked them to lower it to 2,700. They were able to lower it to 2,900 lumens. The next level down for the lighting they're looking at would be 1,550, which would have been just too low. There was a question about the area marked for future addition. They clarified that's just to make sure if anything ever happened in the future, they had land reserved, but they have no intentions of adding an addition right now. We talked about a trail marker. We wanted to make sure that people crossing or leaving this property were aware that a trail existed there, and they volunteered to put trail markers out there. They're actually putting 2 instead of just 1 is what they've offered to do. And you can see that in the packet. Page 28 shows you what the trail crossing markers would look like. And then, assuming all that was okay, I put in a development agreement, not saying we're there yet, but if we are, at least it was there. The only other concern I've had on this one is I did hear from one of the members, they're concerned about the roof line. They think it's too flat. So I did talk with, had some emails back and forth with Jim, and he can comment on that. He felt the roof line matched some of the other development in the area. So that is something we'd probably want to delve into a little bit, is the roof line concern. Other than that, I have nothing else to bring forward, other than they've provided what we've asked them to provide.
Okay. Do any plan commission members have any comments or questions that?
Denise?
Please go ahead, Patrice.
Yes. I did have a concern. In my eyes, this development is very industrial looking. This is the first impression you get when you come down the Big Sister Bay Hill there out of Ephraim, is your first impression of Sister Bay as driving through on 42. Every other business has some kind of character to its building, some type of peak, facade, scrolling, shape, or whatever. This is the only one that's completely flat roof and very industrial looking to me, like a car dealership. And I don't know if that's what we really want for Sister Bay. The only exception to that would be like Jerry's Flowers, which has been there forever. And I just think we should strive to go forward and to have some kind of character into the look of our new developments and buildings here in Sister Bay. It doesn't have to be a lot of money, but I would like to see some kind of peak or facade or something artistic on that roof, not just to be completely flat. That would look better. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrice. Rob?
My question would be on page 68 of the packet. And if you look on page 68 at the area where the trash enclosure is,
Rob, I think you're on the wrong file.
Yeah, we're in the 20s.
this is Beacon Marine, right?
Yeah.
We're on 6A. Page 68 is a drawing on the Beacon Marine development.
Oh,
You're
I'm
telling
sorry,
me
Rob. Go
that's
ahead.
wrong?
Go ahead.
I see what you're talking about, Rob. where it
Okay,
says-
so my question is, there's a trash enclosure, and I don't see how going garbage is going to get back to where that trash enclosure is to take the trash out of it. It seems like there's in front of the trash enclosure, to the left is all types of landscaping. To the right is a marcated section saying mowed turf. And I'm not sure, I see where Highway 42 is. I see where there's a driveway into the parking lot. So would this driveway would this trash enclosure be visible from 42? And then it's not behind the building, and going's going to come into one of the main parking lot areas and then get the trash that way? Is that?
Yeah, so Rob, my understanding is, okay, so the code does require it to be back behind that front line, which it is. And we do require it to be enclosed, and we did put that in the development agreement to make sure that it's not visible, that you're not seeing the trash. They should have enough area to move her by pulling in there, because that's outside of the parking lot, I guess, where it meets the lawn. Keep in mind, that's not designated for parking, so the truck should be able to pull in, dump, and then go back out.
Okay, all right.
But Chris might have more information on that.
Okay. So basically, it's within code to have the trash dumpster area a standalone, visible from the main thoroughfare, as long as it's fenced in.
As long as it's screened, right,
Okay,
and behind that front wall of the building. So,
And
Yeah,
this
this
is
is-
Jim. To that effect, I would say that screened for sure, not a chain link fence, but some kind of thing that doesn't show what's behind the fence. That's our interpretation of screening, right? And that makes it more beautiful as well.
Well, it says
Julie-
enclosure, so I'm hoping that it's on all four sides.
So Julie, you're saying that's behind the building?
behind the front line of the building.
Okay. All right, thank you for the clarification.
My guess is that we would go with, the typical thing that businesses might do is like a white vinyl fence. I'd prefer something like a cedar, something that would look pleasant, that wouldn't necessarily give it away that it's just there to screen the trash.
But because it is standing alone, and I think Rob makes a good point, it may be code compliant behind the front of the building, but maybe could some trees be planted? Not necessarily a hedge, but just some trees planted nearby that as they grew, they wouldn't necessarily interfere with the enclosure, but just 3, 4, 5
Absolutely.
trees.
Absolutely. It's not, again, this has to be a welcoming, cool place to go. So, it's not just about code, it's going beyond code to say, this needs to not even be noticeable that's the way I want it. That's not really anything to do with, well, let's do the minimum we need to do, right? It's not like it's out on Old Stage Road, it's right here in the heart. So we definitely would use a hedge or a combination of hedge and natural wood. I don't want a vinyl, like, Chris, help me out. What am I trying to say here? My builder.
Right. I think with the look of your building, I think something more in a natural tone to match the wood like product that you're going to use would be appropriate. Yeah, white would be glaring, so I agree, in a natural wood tone.
We're not going to go the cheap route. I want to go the cool route.
Yep.
Just looking at the map here, or the layout, if you, it's a rectangle, if you just butted it to your building on the back corner, I think that would minimize everyone else's concerns here. So instead of having it off on a diagonal like that, just butt it to the building.
Chris, can we do that?
Well, this is Chris Herzog with ACE Building Service speaking. So the trash enclosure, if we were to turn that, 45 degrees-ish and set it right next to the building, unfortunately, the dumpster, the garbage truck is not going to be able to navigate that turn. And I would point out that, the shrubs, the cedar hedge that was requested at the previous meeting, which has been adding to the landscape plan, will screen that trash enclosure as you're headed out of Out of town. There could be some plantings placed around the trash enclosure itself, but I mean, at some point, you're going to have to see it because of course the vehicle has to gain access to the trash closer. Relocating it behind the building is actually going to require additional asphalt, which I'm guessing is probably
No,
something that you would not want.
good point. Thank you. Yeah, I also wanted to comment I just brought up Google Maps. And I'm looking at the property, I'm looking at Wisconsin Building Supply to the right, and I'm looking at a gas station on the left. I think the building fits. By the fact that you've broken it up with the wood, it kind of ties into Wisconsin Building Supply. There's no way you can incorporate with the gas station. So I guess I'm okay with the front look. Plus, I did come and look at that siding. It is interesting stuff.
Thank you, David. Rob?
Jim, I just wanted to mention one thing to you. Because I'd feel remiss if I didn't. And checking out the stucco application product in Julie's office, I just made it a point to myself to want to ask you if your team knows if that has been tested under power washing circumstances. When I looked at, it's a fascinating way they've got that stucco on there. My first thought was it's such a thin layer on there, and I could just be speaking from the reality of, because I'm such a klutz with a power washer, I've damaged a lot of surfaces in my time. But
that's a good question.
I'm just, it would seem to me just worth your while if it's not in the product information to ask somebody, because when you hold that sample up and look at how thin that layer is on there, it just seems like ultimately at some point you might want to power wash that building, and I hate for you to damage that.
That's a really good question.
This is Chris Herzog speaking again. I can answer that question for you. It is a very durable finish material. It's factory applied. It's a baked on product, so it gets installed in a similar manner to how you would bake on an enamel paint finish. We have installed that product many times before. I think our longest standing installation is about 30 years. It's in that neck of the woods, and yeah, it absolutely holds up to power washing.
Oh, that's great to know. It's a fascinating looking product. It's a heck of a selection.
Anyone else?
I just wanted to make an additional comment that the roof is not technically flat. It's flatter. There's no doubt about that. But there is a pitch to it, front to back. That's not to say that it has any semblance of a peak or a steep roof, but just so that no one, I think I'd be remiss if I wanted to let anyone walk away thinking that it was a truly flat roof when there is a pitch to it, but other comments are duly noted.
Okay.
So I hear and understand what Patrice is saying on that greets you there, but I think that when I visualize that coming down the hill, no offense, Denise, but I don't think that gas stations are attractive whatsoever. They're an unfortunate necessity in society today. But I think that that's going to kind of be in the sight line of that gas station. I think that's a good thing. I do think that Lampert's is got some rather interesting facades that really do fit in the village, but I would agree with David that where this is and its surroundings, I do think that it fits.
I understand Patrice's point. The Christ building is not necessarily beautiful. Lampert's has its own little feel. I think for what this is, and with all the glass and with the additional landscaping, I'm okay with it, but I understand your point, Patrice. So if we have no more questions, Janelle, would you like to read the motion?
Okay. That the Plan Commission approves the revised materials that were viewed at this meeting, as well as the siding that was included in the packet, or that was available for review at the village administration office. Now, do you want to address the development agreement at this time, or is that a separate issue?
That's a separate issue.
Okay. And recommends that the village board approve a related development agreement.
Denise,
Yes, Julie?
can I just add two things to that?
Yes.
That the dumpster be screened to match the wood tone of the building. And additionally screened on 3 sides with a vegetative screening capable of enclosing the dumpster area from public view on those 3 sides, however we word that.
I
And then
think
I
two
do-
sides would be okay, seeing that they're adding the
Two?
line of trees on the property line.
Okay, and then the other thing is just to make sure that we do add that the trail signage cannot be in the right of way, because we can't authorize that in the highway right of way. That's not our jurisdiction. And then we'd want to make sure that was reflected in the development agreement if approved.
Okay. So with Janelle, what she read and planting a few trees on the 2 sides of the dumpster enclosure and making sure that the trail signage that was presented is not in the DOT right of way. Is there a motion to approve as presented?
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Bell. Is there a
Second.
second? Second by Schmitz. Any further discussion? All those in favor respond with an aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No,
Motion carried. So then we should move on to the development agreement. Julie, do you want to take us through?
Sure. The development agreement basically reiterates those things we were concerned about. Making sure that the color is the way we wanted, or I shouldn't say the color, that they're using that stucco siding, that it's the gray color we looked at. Making sure it's those plans we reviewed tonight. And then, of course, there is information in there about the garbage enclosure, but we would enhance it by adding those items we just spoke about, which is to make sure we've got trees on the 2 sides and that it's screened with a product to match the wood tone of the building. And then also just making sure in the development agreement that it's very clear that that trail signage cannot be in the road right of way without the Department of Transportation approval.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions on the development agreement that's been presented? Then a motion to approve as amended. Motion by Kane.
Second.
Second by Gretzmacher. All those in favor respond with an aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
no,
Motion carried. Okay, I'm just scrolling through the packet here, trying to find the next agenda item.
Page 85.
Thank you. Okay, item 6B, code interpretation of front of building, 6-unit multifamily development coming of age in Sister Bay LLC, AKA Badger et al., Sister Bluff Road and Mariners Point Drive. Julie?
Sure.
Well,
So
Can I,
when
Julie,
this-
Julie, this
Yeah.
is Jim. I'm sorry, I didn't realize we were done. Could I just say a closing comment? Is that okay, Denise?
Sure, Jim.
Thank you for working with us, group. I would invite all of us, I would invite all of you to make comments, suggestions, as you see fit to us, to me, to the office. I've built this business to be part of the Sister Bay community. And even though I live in Ellison Bay, partly, I am a taxpayer in the village. So I'm very proud of what we're going to build, and I really crave input. So please don't feel like we're just here for an approval and now we're gone. We want to continue to work with the village. Hopefully we can hire some people as well and make this a really cool place, a good destination, and a place that when people come down the hill, hopefully that everyone will say, hey, that's cool. And maybe it doesn't always fit every architectural detail, but it'll add life and vitality to that part of the town. So thank you very much for working with us. And Julie, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Go ahead, Julie.
All right, so the Bader property is one we've seen before. Last fall, there was a young couple that wanted to rezone it, and they did not pursue that. We had explained that we would not spot zone. And then earlier, or within the last couple months, we had Bader, who then was a different party, was looking at the property, and he wanted to know if we would give him a waiver, density waiver, and we said no. So Bader did go ahead, Bader and party did go ahead and purchase the property, and they want to put up 6 units, which is allowed in the code. And they've come up with plans, and we've been working together. They've been really good about trying to meet the code. The one issue we had was, what is the front of the building? Because the front of the building has different rules than the side in this zone, in the R2 zone. And so it became really important. And normally, you know, I think when, from a zoning perspective, the front of the building would be what you see when you cross that front lot line. But in this case, it almost seems like what you see then would be the side of the building. So before Mr. Bader could go further and finalize the plans, we needed an interpretation on what is the front of a building. Is it what you see when you cross that front lot line? Or is it the point where you access into the building, such as the side with the garage doors? If you look on page 85, you'll see a sketch of the building. And we know we have to make some minor changes and revisions to that, but it's a beautiful building, you know, good looking building. And then when you go to page 86, this was the original proposal. And you can see that as you come off of Sister Bluff Drive, which is on the right-hand side of your drawing, and you cross that front lot line, you're actually looking at the side of the first building. But if you look at the southerly building, you're looking at the front of, or I'm sorry, the garage of that side of that building. So before we can go further to see if they meet code, we need an interpretation. What are we going to consider as the front of the building? Mr. Bader did submit a revised drawing, which I personally think is the most appealing. I think that it would make sense in this case to call the front of the building the side that he accesses or parallels his driveway. But that, of course, is a decision you have to make. Heidi, can you pull up that PDF that I sent you? So this is, no, wrong plan, Julie, wrong plan.
Julie, if you need, I can screen share also. I have them ready.
Can you? Why
Yep.
don't you do that? I thought I gotta check the one I emailed Heidi. I must have sent her the wrong one today.
Could I ask you a quick question while you're searching for that, Julie?
Sure.
If we have a staff report and an image and it says in your staff report below is what the building would look like, what do we need to look at beyond this? Why would we need to look at something else other than that image?
We need to make a determination as to what do we consider the front of a building, because that makes a difference on whether his plan meets code or not.
I'm with you on that part. My question is, why would we need more than this image here?
more than what's there, I guess, just to see the difference it makes when you're looking at a plan.
Well, I
Heidi-
would ask that, or I would say that to me, this is, I understand what you're asking about the need, you know, your perceived need for interpretation, but to me, what's crystal clear in your staff report is the beginning of the second paragraph that says the code says garages cannot dominate the front facade. And then on the last sentence of that paragraph, it says for this project, how we define front makes a difference as to whether the project would be allowed or not. To me, that image on page 85 is a perfect example of a code that says garages cannot dominate the front facade. That's clearly the front facade of the building. That's where they get into the building. And I'm not comfortable talking about how one might spin a building to try and make it conform to code and how one person might think the side of the building's really the front. If you stopped anyone on the street and said, are you looking at the front of a building there? They'd say, yeah, I'm looking at the front of a building. There's the entrance, there's the garages.
Well, and see, Rob, that's not what the code says. And that's why we're looking for your the code
Okay.
is silent on what is the front. And that's why we want to know, what do you consider the front, so they can proceed and come back with those final plans.
I think the front of the building is one thing, whichever way it faces, and I think the front yard is a different thing. So I believe their front yard faces Sister Bluff Road.
Right.
But I believe the front of the building is the way you walk into it, or when you walk into your front door.
Everyone, this is Garrett. Would you mind if I screen share that image? Just like maybe walk through and answer to those questions right there and at least give some background rationale on how we ended up where we are right now.
Yeah, and I
So-
can maybe add to that a little bit too. So
Well, before we do that, I guess I'd like to have further conversation of the Plan Commission on what they're thinking before we add more stuff to the conversation. So do other commission members, do we have a general consensus that the front of the building is where you walk into it when you're standing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where your front door is.
Definitely.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would agree. I agree with what you're saying, Denise, but this is absolutely interpretation as well, because, and I remember talking about this code probably 8 years ago, saying, well, which is the front door? I don't know if you remember that, Marge. We
I
actually
remember.
talking about this. And it's hard to say. I really think that what they're going to show us could help us see and help us make that judgment. I would love to say that the front of the building is where people have their pedestrian entry, and then the cars can just go tuck around back. But I'm not sure that that's how it works out here. So I do think that it would be helpful to see what the renderings that they're going to show.
Oh, and that's fine. I'm going to let them show them. I just kind of wanted to get a feel first on right now with the information that we have, how we are interpreting the code, and if we still feel that way, that we should probably define that better, and put it on the list of text amendments that we need to make when the next time we hold a public hearing.
I guess one thing that's not showing on here right now is I just want to see, like, what is it for walkways and all that? I mean, are you going to walk, if you come walking off the street, which place are you going to come from? That would be what my judgment would be based on.
Yeah.
And I think once everyone has had their comments, maybe Garrett and I can talk through a little bit of, the intent, or what we think the intent of, the garage on the front means, I guess. So definitely willing to listen to all comments and then, maybe talk to that a little bit.
Well,
So I'm
Heidi,
going to try to share my screen once more, because I may have selected the wrong file.
okay.
If I give Garrett permission, then Janelle's videos or recording is going to be cut off. So
Oh.
is this the right file, Julie?
Yep.
Right. Yep. And if I may, if it's okay to speak right now, the
That's
intent,
fine.
thank you. The intent that we've had here is so that there are no garage doors fronting a public street. So in the earlier discussion about what is front, what is not front, where you walk in, sure. We didn't want to have any garage doors facing out, whether that was Sister Bluff or Mariners Point. So here, when you turn into the driveway off of Sister Bluff, you'll know the garage fronts all face each other. We're trying to preserve as much of the trees that are existing there on the perimeter, by the way, so that there's a natural buffer anyway. The most recent question I think Nate asked right there, where would the doors be? Looking at your screen at there, building 2, your topmost right one, and building 3, your bottom one. Hypothetically, you have doors that face each other, but those 2 would be very simple to rotate those doors 90 degrees if we wanted to face out. So you see windows on the side and a front door, hypothetically. That's very simple.
Yeah, and and I think people don't want to see a bunch of garage doors and nothing else from the street. So if you take 42, you kind of take a left and then a left to get to this. So it's not on the way in. You don't see it. It's not an eyesore. It is kind of a standard size garage. So I think the intent is, as you look at the property, you don't see any garage doors because all of the units are oriented, perpendicular to the entry to the property.
I just want to remind the Plan Commission, it wasn't so very long ago that we were dealing with the cranes and all their different styles of housing. And we made them push their garages back, bring their entrances forward.
Mhm.
Do you folks have access to the renderings that we showed, not the elevations, but the renderings, the 3D renderings?
Those are in the packet, Garrett.
Okay. From that standpoint, and there'll be, we've continued to tweak our plans as we've gone through this process. But one thing to note is that the front door, where they'll be in each building, to my earlier point, if we hypothetically were to rotate those, you'll now have even more windows on the side than even you see there, because we actually mirror imaged our inside to have our dining and living space facing that outside wall. So you're going to have now at least 2, if not maybe even a 3rd window on that side facade. So depending on, well, the fascia treatment may yet change a little bit. You'll at least have a lot of transparent glass, plus maybe even a front door. So we'd hope that the commission would see that, especially from the Sister Bluff side and with no garages on the Mariners Point side, it's hopefully as neighborhood friendly as we can be.
Garrett, I just have to.
When you say the 3D rendering is in the packet, are you talking about the one picture on page 85? Because there's only 2 pages.
Yeah, I was just going to explain to Garrett, I have to apologize that no, what happened is they're not in the packet because I wanted to get this clarified before we brought the plans forward to the Plan Commission, because the plans right now don't meet code. The ones that we looked at last week, Garrett. So they have to make some revisions. They did send in some new plans Friday evening. But until we know, like I said, what is front, I can't finish reviewing them.
David, are you about to say something?
Who, Garrett?
I was good with my comments for the moment. I can, happily answer any questions that anyone has.
So my 7 cents would be, I like, growing up in the neighborhood, I've always thought of where the front door is where the front of the house is. However, in this kind of development, I'm leaning towards, I like the fact that there are no garages facing the street. So I'm going to say the front-ish is, there's maybe 2 fronts. However, based on what, thank you Denise for reminding us what we asked the cranes to do. If I'm looking at this rendering on page 85, I would say if we could pull the entrances forward and push the garages back and stagger them, I think that would also help.
I mean, there is, and I did talk to Julie about, I think I talked to Julie about this, that we could, if our intention is to shield or make it more pleasant from any roadway, that there is verbiage that if it's not a through road, if it's a driveway, that the front yard versus the front of the building, that we could come up with verbiage that would allow this to happen if the goal is to not have the front facades being seen by everything on the nearest road. But because it all faces into their driveway, that is an option that we would also have if we're comfortable with that. Right, Julie?
Yeah. Yeah, we just, like I said, and maybe it's one of those things that's a case by case basis, because you never know what somebody's going to come up with, but
well, I don't like it case by case. I think we'd have to come up with wording, because when we dealt with the cranes, that was a true road. It was not a driveway. May have been a private road, but people still could travel down it. And they complied with our request to the best of their ability, and we did finally end up approving it. So, Rob?
My question might be for Julie. So going back to the original request for waiver from these developers to exceed the allowable density, which was denied. Do you recall what the total bedrooms proposed in that initial presentation were?
I'm sorry, Rob, do I recall what was the?
What the total bedrooms were in that
Oh.
initial proposal?
I'd have to go back and look. I can easily do that.
Yeah, it
Or
was,
did Garrett, do you remember, Eric, how many was it?
it was 4.
4 bedrooms
Yeah, 4 bedroom, 3.5 bath
per building?
Per unit.
Okay, so you came to us. So the plans you initially came to us with were essentially included 24 bedrooms.
Well, no, it was for 8. It was the request to go up to 8 units, so that would have been 32 hypothetically.
Okay. So then in layman's view, we're going from 32 bedrooms to 24 bedrooms, which is why Julie, your staff report in essence is saying this new incarnation would be allowed because it's smaller.
It's allowed because of the density, the number of units. So we don't regulate, the size of those units, but we're saying that the number of units is limited to 6 per acre.
Okay,
Heidi?
thank you.
Sure. Heidi?
Yep, I'm here. I'm here.
Can you go into the folder? And you'll see a file. It says GB Real Estate Sister Bay. The very bottom one, it's dated 3/27/23.
Okay. It
Can you
takes me a
pull that
little
up?
bit to connect.
Sure. So what Heidi's gonna share, I'm gonna have her scroll to the very last page of it. That's the rendering of the last rendering of the building. Due to scale, it's kind of hard to really see it, but it gives you an impression. I know you talked about pushing the garages back or forward, etc. But it gives you an idea of what the building would look like as far as this current plan goes, this last plan.
So Julie, the computer is frozen and it won't let me grab that file. Can you email it to me?
Sure. It's gonna be a huge file.
Julie, I can email the individual rendering
Photo?
image, which is much.
That perfect.
Okay. Heidi, can I have your email address, please?
Heidi, HEIDI .TEICH@sisterbaywi.gov.
Okay, one more. All right, it is coming your way momentarily. All right, they're 2 megs each. I sent 2 images there, 4 megs, but it should be there in maybe 30 seconds or so.
Just waiting. Yep.
Can I ask you a quick question while we're waiting, Julie?
Sure.
So when I look at your subject line of the staff report and it says 6-unit multifamily, non-transient, non-short-term rental development. Is that non-transient based off of the definition we heard in the refrain last meeting, transient being 30 days or less?
Yeah, so short-term and transient mean the same thing to us. I know Gary Wasa was talking about it, but he was using it
Just
in the
30
wrong.
days or less, or what are
30
we?
days or less.
So
Yeah,
then, are we
this
saying then, so then we're saying this, by being a non-transient development, there's some sort of classification already that none of the parties investing in this would be coming for less than 30 days?
Yeah, so this is located in an R2 zone, and in an R2 zone right now, it says that multifamily cannot be used for short-term rental. And Mr. Bader and his company is aware of that.
Okay, but that's not really my question. My question is if it's being declared non-transient, then that means anybody from the investment group that's behind this development would be in one of these units 31 days or more at a time?
Well, they own them, they're building them for their family, so I mean, they might come up for the weekend, but yeah, I mean, if they wanted to rent out their unit, it would have to be rented for 30 or more days, right? More than 30.
I guess I'm just hung up on what, it would seem to me that if we're declaring this non-transient, and then we look at what our definition of transient is, it's not necessarily non-transient.
The code does not allow transient housing, transient multifamily
Okay.
in the R2.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Nice.
Heidi, could you please start on that front image, the one on the left? Thank you. So this is obviously the view of the building as would face essentially each other or face the private drive. This, as you're looking at the site plan, would essentially be building 1 or building 2. Looking to the north in this case. The front door that you see on the left side of your image, that is just one example where I said hypothetically you could rotate that door and achieve a quote unquote front facade on what is otherwise a side facade, if that were desired up against, in this case, Sister Bluff.
Hmm.
So, so we have two options in front of us. I think that's all that I've heard to summarize. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, that either that this, from our interpretation, this does not meet code. Because of the garages meeting the front of the building. But if we were to make a text amendment stating that that criteria would not apply if the garages were facing an internal driveway and not, I don't know the word for it, not facing the vehicular road. Something like that. I
So
guess,
Denise,
yeah, go ahead, Julie.
So as far as a text amendment, definitely, I think we should pursue that. So we don't keep running into this problem. In this particular, but at the current time, there's really nothing in the code. So I don't think we need the text amendment to proceed with this one. I think we just need direction and then come back with a text amendment, you know, in the near future. Because there's nothing in the code that would prohibit, there's nothing in the code that says what the front of the building is. So right now we're just giving them
But
an.
it says, but it does say the garages cannot take up more than 30% of the front facade.
Right, and that's where Garrett knows we have to work with the plans yet, so, you know, there's some details like the length of the sidewall and stuff like that, but we couldn't go further without knowing what is the sidewall, what is the front facade. So
Right.
there's gonna have to be revisions to this plan, but we can't make those revisions until we know what is considered front and what is considered side, or what the committee would consider front and side, since it's not defined.
But I think we did determine that now.
I believe you did. I'm just saying, I don't think we need the text amendment for them to proceed. I think we need that regardless. But I don't want to hold them up until that text amendment is there, because technically there's nothing that says yes or no in the code, is what I'm saying. I mean, I think we give them our interpretation, they keep moving forward. Parallel track is we clean that up so we don't run into this again.
But I am saying it is in the code. I'm disagreeing with you because the garages take up more than 30%.
That's a stipulation in the code, right, that says garages can't, but that doesn't define what's front or side. I agree with you, Denise, their plan does not meet the garage limitation part of the code. That's going to have to change on this plan.
Okay. But if the Plan Commission is in favor of a text amendment, that our main concern is that the garages do not face the roadway, then they would be able to leave it the way that it is.
Well, I think if I remember right, the code says.
I'm going to
I
walk
guess-
away. I need my codes on my coffee table. So, but go ahead and talk.
Yeah, I was going to say, I when it's talking about the garages, if I remember correctly, it's not talking about the front of the building. It's just saying the garages can't exceed. Well, actually, let me look at that myself. To me, I was looking at it more importantly as side, you know, the side, these side walls, because in the residential district, they can't exceed a certain length. But what is the sidewall?
We applied this standard not only to the Cove, but we also to the Selinsky buildings up on top of the hill. We actually gave him a little bit of a variance because we wanted 2 cars to be able to park inside. But that was a major issue with his buildings on the corner up there that,
Yes.
yeah.
And again, if I may, while we're obviously happy to answer questions, again, please know that our intent from the beginning is that in most cases, in most municipalities, front yards, front setbacks are your primary street. So here the goal was no garages facing outward streets, very flexible on front door positioning and window positioning by that front door. So it looks like a welcoming, pedestrian, friendly, accessible facade.
So if the rendering that's up now, so if you were to turn that door 45 degrees, would it slide back towards the window or would you bring it out towards that pillar?
I think either is really the answer. It's very much dependent on Plan Commission preference. I like the idea of having an overhang there for inclement weather when you step out. So how that roof line would adjust, we'd have to play with that, but that's not insurmountable. I would prefer to go a full 90 rather than 45. So in this case,
my bad, I meant 90.
fair enough. In this case, when you're looking at here again, assume that this is building 2 that was on your site plan. The front door you're seeing would be on the left, so not on the street side. The side that is hidden because of the angle of this vantage point would be the front door that hypothetically you could rotate out 90 degrees, and therefore that door would be facing Sister Bluff. So then how that post that we have that holds up that corner by the front door or that overhang, again, that's easy to tweak the design. We can incorporate all that.
So I'd like to read the exact code, which in my code book is on page 14. It states, in the R2 district, attached garages for multifamily developments shall be designed and oriented so that they do not dominate the front facade of the building to which they are attached. Attached garages shall not occupy more than 30% of the front facade of the building. Not more than 6 garage doors may appear on any multifamily building facade containing front doors, and the plane along such garage doors shall be broken by an offset of at least 2 feet if more than 2 garage doors are in a row. So I can't tell if they're offset or not.
I'm not sure admittedly if it's 2 feet, but there is an offset there that could always be heightened if desired.
So that's what the current code says.
So if that's the front, we're going to watch that. If that's not the front, then it's not applicable.
Right, but we did determine it was the front.
Yeah, we're in this case, we're saying that's the front.
Well, and can I ask the commission, does the code stipulate a definition for front facade? And that's why I think the intent of the code would be the street facing side or the public right of way facing side.
It does not, Garrett, and that's why we're asking what is front, right? That's going to determine where front facade is.
Sure, and if intent, like most municipalities, again, is where front facade means facing out to the world, we would have 0 garage doors facing, but even as such, someone brought it up earlier and I forget, could we almost have 2 kind of fronts? I think we could, especially those sides that face Sister Bluff. That's very easy to tweak with door moving and window adjustments and facade adjustments, if that helps to satisfy the commission.
Well, there are front yards and there are front facades, and they're not necessarily the same.
Yep, understood. And that's, I was hoping, and maybe there was clarification in the code on that, but it sounds like that, at least at the moment, there's not.
So what we see here is what we're going to call the front. And that helps when we talk about the design, what is the sidewall, etc. And then in the meantime, staff can proceed with a text amendment as well. That maybe we could look at next meeting or the meeting after. I know next meeting we have a big public hearing, but maybe the meeting after we could work on that.
So we do have a definition of frontage, which I believe would also be applicable to front yard and front setback. And our definition of frontage is the dimension of a lot abutting a public street measured along the street right-of-way line. So we do have that. So I think it defines a little bit of what a front yard is, but not what a front facade is, which I think we've come up with now. So, okay. So we'll have staff work on this and come back to us, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Can I ask them one more question, Denise, before they
Yes.
disembark? Garrett, or Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, but if memory serves, you detailed initially in the first presentation how you had essentially a consortium of family and friends and investors who are all going to be together on this, on the units. And is that still the case?
Yeah, the LLC coming of age, actually, it's AGE, so Andy, Garrett, Eric.
Okay.
Once they came up with a cooler name now, but that's all I had at the time.
Okay. And so then when we're calling this a non-short-term rental development, then will those various investors or others be renting on an allowed long-term basis, 31 days or more? Or is this all?
To be
gonna
clear, the investors are us. So the
Okay.
LLCs, myself, Eric, Andy, and Andy's parents are also on the call here.
So is it really a rental, or is it just going to be used without any type of rental agreements between any of the partners?
I mean, these are for us. At the very beginning, when we talked with Julie, we understand what the goals requirements are here, and these are planned as places for us.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Item 6C, draft text amendment for sidewalk policy. Julie?
All right, so this is one we visited a couple times before, and we were told, staff was told to come back with something at this meeting. So basically I have in front of you what would need to be amended to make sure we get sidewalks installed and what those sidewalk widths would be. Basically, you know, right now when we talk about site plan, we don't require or say that we're reviewing them for sidewalk widths and locations, so we would add that language. I'm following along in the packet, just talking about wherever you see red ink, okay? And then under amend 661050, at the bottom of page 88, you'll see that we set the standard saying they have to be at least 5 feet in width. If it is to be installed by the village, an 11-foot easement shall accommodate the sidewalk because we need room to maintain it. And for public safety purposes and potential infrastructure needs, sidewalks shall be separated from the road curb or road edge by a vegetated buffer of no less than 3 feet. That's a standard in street design. And why you do that is to make sure you don't have concrete right up to curb. It's very dangerous. You want to make sure there's a green space to keep pedestrians away from the cars, and then also to absorb any runoff coming off the sidewalk to make sure that it's being absorbed, kind of like we have a 3-foot buffer. Other areas you see that right now is around a home, for example, or a building. We always want to see a 3-foot landscape buffer to give that area between pavement and the building, and this would be the same thing. And then interestingly, we don't have a definition of sidewalk in the code, so I'm proposing that you actually have a definition as well. With those code amendments to the zoning code, because you know we talked about putting it in land division code. I'm working on that, but we had talked about what does it take to be added to the zoning code to be able to require sidewalks and then set a standard of what they would actually, you know, how wide would they be. these are the changes that I've come up with that I find are necessary to make that happen.
So my questions are exactly the same as that they were last time. And that is on the end of page 88. Number 18, sidewalks shall be provided along all sides of the lot that abut a public street. So if does that mean that the guys that we just saw, they need to now put in a sidewalk? Is every single parcel that is going to be developed, whether it's on Northwoods Drive or Highway 42 or 57 or Spring Road?
No, it would not, because
Well, then we need to, because that's not what it says.
well, there's other sections we have to look at it. When we look at the applicability where this applies.
Battery's running low? It's
Pardon me?
plugged in.
Let me just find it real quick, okay? I have to find
Okay.
it. I have to find it, but there's something in the code that says, and maybe it's in the land division code, but there's something that says you have to provide those sidewalks if you are doing commercial development, or if you're making a new subdivision or CSM. So if somebody is dividing property, we can require it, but we don't have anything that says if you have a residential lot and you want to put a house on it, you'd have to put it in there. And I think that's because when you look at our most residential lots, almost all of them do not require a sidewalk. That's why it does say in here somewhere, like I said, if it's commercial or if it's a new subdivision or CSM, then you could do that. We can certainly change that.
Well, I think we need to define it in these places, not necessarily in having to always look, what do these words mean because they're defined or expanded upon in some other section of the code. So I'd really like to know where it is and what we're actually talking about, and should a large multifamily be included in that? And I'm thinking of, I can't remember if the Shoals has sidewalks or not. Did we make them put in sidewalks?
No, we didn't make Tim Halbrook, the Shoals, any of those put in sidewalks. The village is actually going to be paying for that asphalt path along there because we didn't make them put in sidewalks.
Okay,
Which I
so
don't think was right. I mean, I think we can certainly make that a requirement.
I think if you're doing a multifamily development of a certain size, like for an example, the Shoals, Stony Ridge, things of that nature, where you have 10, 20, 30, 40 units, that should also be under consideration for walkability. And I
I think it comes down to, I mean, like those all would apply under the criteria I'm thinking, but I think it comes more down to density than size, because if it's spread over a large area, it comes down to intensity of use and density. This is where I think we should require it.
Okay.
I also had started really thinking about this 5 foot here. Now, when this requirement here, I read it a couple days ago, and I don't remember exactly where I had it, but there was some mention of it will have more or less saying it'll have ingress from the sidewalk to the building. I believe that was in there, something along those lines.
That's
Is
in the
that
code.
going to be held to the same sidewalk standard, or is that simply a path? Are we saying you have to have a 5 foot wide path from the sidewalk to the building?
No, if I remember right, it's called an inside pathway. It's
So that wouldn't have
differentiated.
a 5 foot requirement?
No,
Okay. There's a couple unintended consequences that come out here. I do agree that where we can get 5 foot sidewalks, that's great. But I would hate for us to find a place where we can't fit in a 5 foot sidewalk and then just say we're gonna have nothing. I mean, 4 foot sidewalks are usable. There are certain places that do it. 5 feet is the standard for 2 people to walk by, in opposing directions without interacting with each other. So I wonder if we can give ourselves some flexibility to allow us to permit 4 foot sidewalks in certain circumstances where we can't get that, because there's a number of times it comes up where you can't get the space, you can't get the easement. And I would argue that something is better than nothing in that case for pedestrian access.
If you look in your R2 code, it requires a sidewalk not less than 3 feet from the street to the building.
oh, you mean the passageway, Ron?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so Nate, that answers your question. Does that interior sidewalk have to be 5? No, Ron is saying is specified, though it has to be 3.
I think there's
That's in R2.
that's an accessibility thing too. I think there's some stuff that would make it very challenging that would be less than 3 feet.
Well, how about if I add that list of uses, so it's very clear when we would be requiring a sidewalk? Look at that waiver language. At what, and the code often says that, right? That the plan commission can give a waiver. So we can look at that and add that language in there as well. And then I'll look at that interior passageway stuff that Ron just shared with us.
It's also an R3. So keeps on going.
Okay, yeah, let's make sure that it's everywhere that it should be in the code in each of the zoning districts. In that review, Rob?
I was just gonna ask the same kind of question I asked last time, which is listening to everyone reflect on and deal with the complexity of this as it stands now. Would we theoretically be doing the village harm if we just said we were going to define what a sidewalk is and say, on a case-by-case basis, development by development, the plan commission will consider sidewalks in the parameters of such. And if we wanted to say not less than 3, not more than 8, whatever, but do something to, in essence, simplify it, but also have flexibility in there.
I think the more defined and the less flexibility we give ourselves, sometimes it's easier and people are treated more fairly.
Yeah.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. That's why I asked it. Thank you for the clarification.
Denise, I think I've heard you go on the other side of that one years ago.
It all depends upon what we're talking about. Yes. Yes.
I also
Okay.
wonder if we're talking about amending the site plan and architectural review. I think that we should put something in there about human scale development. Meaning because that was completely lacking from it was not a consideration for people when they're coming to bring developments in. It's not something that's in the code, so why would they think about it? Why would we, to ask the walk-in clinic to make it possible to walk in, should have been in our code. That shouldn't have been something that we came up with, when they wanted to change their sidewalk. So I don't know what language we could put in there to indicate that we want our village to be human scale development, meaning you can walk there. It's accessible because so much of it that has been built is not.
Doesn't ADA kick in though with all the new stuff? I mean, I know it's a little different from what you're talking about, but
Yeah, that's at 3 foot on that there, but I mean, yeah, there's ADA, but that's a little bit different than this is. I mean, like everybody knows they have to follow ADA, whether we put it in our code or not, you're gonna have to.
okay.
I don't know how anybody else feels about that.
I think that's a really good point, Nate. I do.
It sounds like what you're saying in general is that there should be a pedestrian pathway in any of these developments. Or is that not what you're saying?
That's more or less what I'm saying, but I mean, if we give them more general direction in there.
Okay, because that to me sounds different than just a little while ago when you mentioned about, you know, it would depend on density and occupancy, that if there were buildings spread out, whether a sidewalk was needed, it would seem like whether somebody was going to put a 40 unit or a 3-4 unit buildings on a certain property, that a pedestrian pathway would be just as
Proportional
opportune there.
pathway, proportional to the development.
Yeah, okay.
That's what I'm saying there with that density and intensity.
Gotcha.
I mean, I really think that's important moving forward. And if we didn't do that for the Shoals, then, you know, shame on us. Because and I'm going to be bringing up sidewalks when we talk about road widths. And we need to plan better for the future. And, you know, we're not perfect. We try to do the best that we can. But yeah, not having sidewalks at the Shoals to hook up to a path where you're going to have most likely 100 some people living in 3 buildings, that was an error on our part.
Yeah, I think, you know, the term that planners use is walkability. And, you know, there's often this walkability index and all this other stuff. So moving forward, we just have to make sure that we keep that in mind. And I think there's a lot more development to do here yet. So we'll just have to fix it where we can.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess maybe Julie, you can come up with, you know, you're the professional here, we're the amateurs. If you can come up with the best language to accomplish what I think you know what I'm trying to say in there.
Yeah.
You may find the best language to get that across to people coming to play.
Yeah. I might incorporate it into other changes though, because, you know, I've got that administration chapter that I've started. A lot of this falls in there. There's a lot of things we need to change in that administration section that I found. So I might hold off on, so I know you wanted it brought back at this meeting, but I might hold off and just put that all together and bring it back at once rather than have multiple amendments. Just give me a month or two and we'll just bring it back and have more information to address that. If you guys okay with that?
Yes.
Yep.
So are we postponing this until next month, or do you need more time?
I think we can continue the discussion about sidewalks, but as far as proposing actual amendments, bringing something forward to a public hearing, I would prefer whatever we agree upon gets put in that future public hearing on the entire administration chapter.
Okay.
Rather than piecemeal all the amendments to there, just bring that whole chapter forward at once, because there's a lot of
Perfect.
things in there that need to be addressed.
Okay, so then you will come up with the appropriate wording where a breakdown of where it's supposed to go, and that'll be on next month's agenda for further discussion.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. 6D, draft text amendment, private road widths.
So this is one that we said would come back as well. And it's basically, in a nutshell, we don't dictate how wide a private road is. We just kind of leave people on their own with that. Most of the private, and I think that's because, you know, they predated zoning, the majority of them. But so we should, how wide should a private road be? Should there be setbacks there? things of that nature. And you can't just amend it in a zoning code. You also have to look at the land division code. The land division code is where those roads actually get created. So that's where you're actually going to say, when somebody does a CSM or a plat, they have to abut a private road unless allowed by the plan commission, unless a different, so the plan commission has the ability to waive the requirement it be on a public road. Well, I don't think the Village of Sister Bay would ever allow flag lots where you allow lots to be stacked.
Right.
But I think we would allow a private road if the situation justified it, maybe it's terrain or whatever. But again, what we just talked about, we should have some standards so everybody's treated the same. How wide should that road be? And then when you get to zoning, should there be setbacks from it? Those are things that I don't think we've ever talked about because there's nothing in the code to those effects. And they have become issues. As we know, we've had one discussion already about it, but I have had somebody contact me about developing a piece of property off Country Lane. And they asked if they could be on a private road, if that's prohibited. And I said, well, this is what the code says. It has to be public unless the plan commission gives you a waiver. What would we do with that? We don't have anything to go by. We don't know how wide the existing private roads are because they're very old. So let's talk about it and get something that we can use to be fair and consistent. So what I have here is I put, and again, this is the discussion part, that the roadway would have to be a private road in land division code, would have to be at least 24 feet wide with a surface of 18. I picked 24 feet wide because that's what we require for a driveway. That's the minimum driveway width in multifamily. So I'm like, if you have multiple families going down that private road, to me, that's kind of the same as a multifamily driveway. So that's why I had 24. I did the surface had to be 18 feet because that's two 9-foot driving lanes or asphalt where the cars actually drive. I also said if it creates fewer than 5 parcels, it could be narrower. And I picked 5 because that's the cutoff between doing a CSM or a full-blown subdivision, right? If it's, 5 or more, you have to go with the subdivision, do that full platting. Fewer than that, you could actually do a CSM. So in my mind, when I look at the code, that's a differing point, So if you're not going to be a full-blown subdivision, yeah, maybe you can get by with a smaller roadway because you don't have as much traffic. You only have the 5 homes on it. Again, we can change that. It's just a starting point for the conversation. In the zoning code, we do talk about, in the zoning code, I did kind of did the same thing. So we would be saying, because we don't address this right now, if you're on a private road that does not meet code and you want to expand or do something, what are the requirements? This basically would say, if it's a 2-way road, this is what you have to do. If it's a 1-way road, this is it. And if it doesn't meet that, you're going to have to expand it to meet those requirements.
So I think the last time that we talked about this, I had asked for a printout. I think it might have been in our packet about the Village of Sister Bay road widths, and Heidi printed it off and got it to me. So I was reviewing that, thinking about what you were proposing. And I know that the trend is to have narrower streets, blah, 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 blah. We also live in the north where sometimes we get a lot of snow, sometimes we don't, or it just comes all at once. I am not comfortable in saying 18 feet is okay. I think if we want to have a 24-foot dedicated easement, the road surface should be at least 18 feet. And the reason that I say that is, again, thinking about the walkability for whatever is being built, however many are being built. And you get too narrow or there's too much snow buildup, your roadway becomes narrower. And even though it may not be a highly trafficked road, but then again, if any of these become STRs, you could have a whole lot more traffic than 5 single families living in them. So I would be comfortable with 20. And then I think, let me see. Any division creating fewer than 5 parcels and access by a private road shall be at least 10 feet wide. I think it should be more than that. I think the minimum should be 12, an additional couple of feet. That's kind of where I'm at. I don't think we should go less than 20 feet. And I like the fact that there has to be a 24-foot dedicated easement. So if something happens in the future that we are unaware of, what may or may not happen, that then at least the space is set aside.
My only concern with that is these private roads are wider than village roads because, you know, our lanes, 9 feet is actually a pretty wide lane. A vehicle is, don't quote me, I think 6 feet wide, 6.7 feet wide maybe is a pickup truck. So requiring really wide lanes in for a private road, in my opinion, is overkill because it's more than we'd require on a village road.
But our village roads go, most of them are 20 to 28 feet. The bulk of them, when I look at this printout.
Is that the road surface, Denise?
It just says width.
Let me find mine.
I mean, like when it says Mill Road, South Spring to Claflin is 28 feet wide, I would imagine it's 28 feet wide because it's all pavement with sidewalk.
You know, I tried cleaning up and getting organized and I can't find anything. So.
And let me go grab because I had the other thing that the LRIP thing, maybe it states on that what the surfaces are, but let me go grab that.
Yeah, it does on here. It's called WD number 8.
Julie, your 6 feet is just about spot on. It's just a hair over 6 feet as the average car.
16?
6 feet for the
6
width.
feet. Yeah, I was gonna say, because I looked it up and I thought a pickup truck was 6.7.
Yeah. I understand Denise's point, but at some point it's just putting extra pavement out there and we've got enough pavement. We can maybe rearrange it and have it in better places, but I do think we have got enough pavement. For what
Yeah.
we've got in the village.
You know, if you look at Ava Hope Court, you know, that's kind of like a little private road, I guess. It's not, but it's not a lot of traffic. That one has a surface of 20 feet.
I mean, I heard a little bit the tail end of what you were saying, Nate, that we have a lot of asphalt, but I just don't think we should go backwards necessarily. And because some of the village's roads are narrower than that, it's because they are so old, all have, development on them. Not saying that we won't be addressing some of those in the future. As an example, we have Northwoods Drive. It says that it's 10 feet wide. State Highway 57 to Ava Hope Court. And it's 10 feet wide, but then we have Northwoods Drive, State Highway 57 to Ava Hope Court is 20 feet wide.
Yeah, so that road kind of changes width. It goes 20 and then 10. It's not uniform.
So because some of our roads are not consistent in where we'd like them to be, doesn't mean that we will not try to address them as we work down our paving list to make them pedestrian friendly, and walk enough for safety.
I would
That's
caution that making wide roads is not necessarily going to do a lot for pedestrian safety, because as soon as you put pedestrians and vehicles in the same roadway, it's not particularly safe. So I don't see that as a good way to to use that asphalt that we're going to have.
Right. And so then here is a solution to that my thought process is if we have any road less than 20 feet, that we require a sidewalk on one side of the road.
So that doesn't address what I just said though, Denise. Because I just said that if we have wide roads, that having a wide enough road does not necessarily make a road compatible with pedestrian usage.
I know,
Wide-
but I'm talking about if we do an 18-foot road, it's less than 20, they have to put in a sidewalk.
So one of the things that happens is you narrow roads down. The worst way to manage traffic speed is with speed limits. The best way to do it is designing the roads, and the wider you make the roads, the faster people will go on them. So in a lot of ways, if I'm going to go out there on my bike, I'd much rather go down North Spring than any other road, even though that's a much narrower road. It's because people are paying attention and they're engaged. There's two states of awareness people have when they're driving. When they're kind of going on autopilot, they're not really paying attention to what's going on. But when they're in a heightened state, they are paying attention. They're much more actively engaged in their environment. So
Okay.
I'm not saying that we shouldn't have wider roads some places, but I'm saying wider roads do not mean safer roads. And that's something that is counterintuitive. I understand that, but it really is. So it's more complicated than that, just to say wider roads, safer roads, better for road users. But I think on these private roads, I think that a 9 or 10 foot width for a single direction, that's more than enough. That gives you plenty of room on either side. And the other thing is, just because vehicles are being made wider doesn't mean that we should be making our roads that much wider. I mean, at some point, they just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. We keep adjusting to it. When is it going to stop?
Patrice?
Yeah, my concern is, what does the fire department think about this? I mean, I'm sure they would appreciate a wider road versus a narrow road. Do they have any type of rules or direction for us here?
Yeah, I think Chris Heck has stated that he's okay with an 18-foot wide road, and it's the height of any trees that would interfere with the big trucks coming in. I think it's 13.5 feet, if I
Yeah.
remember correctly.
That-
So I
that's
think that
okay.
should also be a part of our code, that if you're putting in a new road, yes, we want you to plant street trees and do these other things, but you're going to have to also have that clearance for emergency vehicles. I think that's part of not just the widths of the road, but the clearance.
Right, thanks.
And on driveways, I know that's an issue for Chris as well, because people let the canopy go over the driveway and they can't get into the lots as well. So
I
what do
would
you
say
want to,
The driveway is a different issue though, because that's impacting one person and that's their own property. So however they choose to do that is ultimately going to impact them. We're talking about this, we're talking about other people that may not actually have control over it.
so with the land division code, do we want to make a difference between whether it's a lot that's potentially a CSM or one that's a subdivision and can have more property, more lots?
I thought that was a good definitive separation.
Okay. And then do we like the idea that there be at least a 24-foot road bed? At least on the larger one. Again, that's a minimum.
Are you talking about just the easement?
Yeah, just the easement, the land that they have to set aside just for the road easement, the right of way to right of way.
I'm good with that.
So 24 on if it's more than 5 lots?
I mean, I
'Cause
think
that's
other
what a
plan
lo-
commission members need to chime in
No, I
here.
mean,
Yeah.
that's what I was saying, like that you have to look at that being maintained because those people that own those lots may not have the ability to say, hey, I want this cut and whatnot. So we need to look at offer those people in the future. So I would agree with that 5 lot designation.
More than 5 would have 24 feet, a 24-foot easement, Nate. What about less than 5?
In my head, I start getting complicated formulas in my head saying, well, it depends on the distance of the driveway. Because there's a function of that comes into play too, but I think that gets way too complex. I would say if it's less than 5, what about a 20-foot?
It should be plenty.
20-foot easement?
Yeah.
Okay, now let's talk about road beds. So if you have more than 5 lots, so you're basically looking more like a subdivision now, you have a 24-foot easement. Land has to be set aside for that road and for maintenance and ditches and utilities. How big is the road bed, which is the part you actually drive on, the asphalt?
And this is where you were proposing 18 feet.
Right, because in my mind, a subdivision, you have more traffic coming and going. You've got two-way traffic, so you need 2 lanes. And if each lane, and a 9-foot is a pretty adequate lane, and that's why I had said 18 if you have more than 5 lots.
Just to say it out loud, if you've got 9-foot lanes, the average car is 6 feet. That means you've got 6 feet of additional space on
Right.
the paved surface.
And again, I was looking at pickup truck with the average pickup truck being 6.7, but point taken, it allows a little bit beyond the vehicle. And I guess if you had to ride your bike down there, there's 2 feet there.
Well, no, Julie, there's 9 feet there. That's how the state of Wisconsin works. That's not 2 feet for there, that's 9 feet.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I get. So if
So don't we currently have some main roadways that are wider than 18 feet?
we have some public roadways that are wider than
Yeah.
18, yeah.
So my question would be, from a safety perspective, is it worth cutting down certain roads to 18 feet rather than the width of some of those quote unquote public roads because of the type of RVs and everything else and these big, 12-person vans and all the rest of the stuff that come through town and the stuff that people come through town with towing stuff, towing boats, towing a vehicle behind. I'm just curious from a safety standpoint, are we keeping incidents like that in mind if we're talking about making certain roads a little bit smaller than what these roads, those types of operations are driving down, who may turn down to a different road? You know, if we're concerned about, you know, is 3 feet with a 6-foot vehicle enough on one side of a road? And I'm not saying we shouldn't be. Are we tightening things too much by going with 18 feet? Should it be a little wider? That's my question that I'm posing.
Yeah, I view it as a private road, so it's not the general public going down there. They're, you know, they pretty much should know who's going down that road, I guess. Typically a dead end road or loops around. So it's kind of a controlled environment. I view it a little different, that it's not like a highway where you're gonna have semis and all sorts of traffic. But
You're
yeah,
gonna have
could you have a
deliveries,
camper in a
you're gonna have
residential
deliveries
subdivision?
being
Yeah.
made when they need appliances.
Pardon
You're
me?
going to have, you know, you're gonna have people, you know, I'm just asking I'm not trying to be a stick in the mud. I'm just saying, I
Wait a minute,
could
this
make
is
a case for, are we cutting off our nose to spite our face by trying to narrow things down? That's all. And
this is
my
a
fellow
pri-
committee members are comfortable with cutting it down like that. I'm not out to make a mountain out of a molehill.
David?
This is a private road. I don't think we need to worry about people driving RVs down there willy-nilly, that they're going to have a purpose for it. I think the 18 makes good sense. Again, it's not a public road. It is a private road.
I agree with David.
Yeah, so do I.
As do I.
So
Okay,
then
so I
if
have,
somebody did a development and wanted a private road, like we had one in the past year, and if memory serves, one of the contentious issues was that developer wanted the road a lot wider for various purposes, some of which I, to my recollection, am repeating. That would be a case of they'd have to apply for a variant and try to justify why that private road should be bigger than the 18 feet, correct?
This is a minimum standard, Rob.
Okay,
They can make it as wide as, up to a certain point is
okay, all right.
wider.
I
got
would
it.
encourage us to put a maximum on there too, and I think that for that, I would say 24 feet.
So then if we're talking about less than 5 lots, we have a 20-foot easement. So then how much is paved on a 20-foot easement?
That 18 feet then?
Still stick at 18?
18.
Just stick at
18
18.
feet.
Okay. I also think that we should have criteria in there, which I don't think we have, and I think it will help with safety, is that they are required to stripe it. Because I think if you have a striped road, you're going to be a little more cognizant where your center line is, where the shoulder is, to stay in your lane.
I guess I would say if we're gonna do that, let's make sure we're doing all of the striping, not just the center lane striping, but let's do the side striping.
Yes, yes.
Too. The only thing that I see an issue with is it is a challenge to get striping done up here. I mean, I know I go down Mink River Road all the time, and there's no striping on there. To your point, it's less safe because of it, because people don't perceive a lane.
Right.
But that's something.
If it's newly paved, you can tell where the center line is, but as it ages, it kind of goes away.
Yeah.
Okay. I would like that criteria. And then we do have,
Well, should we require them to update that? Because that paint does fade after a few years. So should we require, is there something where we can require them to maintain it?
maintain it.
you can do that via the development agreement if there's a development agreement on it.
I
But if
guess
it's not a development agreement, then it has to be in the code.
Yeah.
I would be curious to know what's a reasonable timeline on there. I mean, we don't need fresh shiny new paint every year, but at the same point, I don't really, seems like it goes 2 or 3 years before it needs striping.
Well, that's because we dump salt on it and drag plows over the top of it. We should.
They'll probably do that on this road too, David, just not as much. And sand, don't forget the piles of sand that are on that.
Oh, God. Let's just have some place where there's no snow. That'll work.
I think I remember when we didn't have an administrator and somebody, I was reviewing just a single family home lot for a permit. And they had their driveway right on the lot line. And I remember doing research. And I thought in R1, it said that you had to be 5 feet off the lot line.
That's right.
So but if we need clearance now for the fire department of that 13.5 feet, or whether we just want to go up to 14 feet, is 5 feet off the lot line good enough if we wanted the developer to plant trees, to screen, to landscape? I don't know that it is.
Well, you know what's interesting is, so in one district, it differs in the code. So in one area, it says you have to plant a tree every 35 feet along the road. There's another one that says you have to plant that tree every 40 feet along the road. So let's say you have your driveway 5 feet off, and then you have a 24-foot driveway. You pretty much have to plant that tree right at the edge of the driveway to make that 35 feet, which means that tree is going to come in over your driveway.
Right.
Unless it's a tree without a canopy, I guess, or you're still going to have branches stretching out over that driveway. Yeah, I think with that requirement, it's really hard to make it, and you'd be better off being further from the side lot line. I think we'd have to do it moving forward clearly, because there's a lot of driveways that are 5 feet off the property line.
Right. So I think it should be 10 feet.
Okay.
I don't know how anybody else, I mean, that would be the absolute minimum.
I guess I'm not crazy about the 13.5 feet clearance being so hard in there, but I mean, I guess that's not something we're putting into the code, because the reality is you can have some branches and all that within that 13.5 feet. And it's still, the vehicles can get through there. You just can't have any big branches that are obstructing it. But I don't know that we're even talking about that 13.5 feet in here. The other thing that comes to mind is Waters End Road. Just think about that road and what that looks like, and how there is canopy that's crossing in there. And I suspect there's probably some stuff within 13.5 feet of the road. I feel like as important as making sure public safety can get in there, there's also some element of our community maintaining its character. You know, we shouldn't clear cut everything just so we can make sure we can get every large vehicle into every location. We should be reasonable with that.
Right, but I was talking about inserting it into the code, Nate.
The 13.5 feet, how are you going to define that 13.5 feet? Are you going to say you can't have any branches in there? You can't have an obstruction? What does that clearance look like?
Well, and I think that's why it would help if we have a larger side setback so that there could be area. I mean, when a tree gets really big, not having any branches for 13 feet, I mean, the maples in my front yard that are probably 100 years old or more, they don't have any low hanging branches and 13.5 feet. So as they get bigger, you continue to limb them up, and they're still beautiful trees just because they don't have a lower canopy.
So you're saying you don't want, and for that 13.5 feet, you don't want any canopy in there. That's got to be.
No, I'm not saying that, you know, everybody's got to be out there I don't know what the solution is. Yes, you can have some, but what is the appropriate amount? How big are the limbs? Are they going to bust? Are they going to damage something? Or are they pliable? I don't know. You're pushing me.
Just a little, I mean, like, but this is important when we have.
It
good
is.
code. This is what makes good code.
Yes,
we're gonna-
absolutely.
If we're going to mandate that you have to have, and I'm just thinking about my neighbor's driveway right now. If you're gonna mandate 13.5 foot clearance, he hasn't plowed in 2 months. So doesn't make any difference if he's got 100 foot clearance up, you can't get into the driveway.
But that's his driveway. This would be on the road. So in more, let's say in more R1 districts, the houses aren't necessarily set back that far from the road. So if they can't actually pull into the driveway, and I don't know if they would anyway, they can situate their trucks actually on the road and still fight a fire or do what they have to do, where a longer driveway, that's kind of a different story.
Or a private road.
Or a private road.
Okay.
I don't know, maybe Julie can play around with that a little bit.
Yeah, it's Liberty Grove actually has that in their code. When we first talked about, if you hold on just a second, I can tell you what that says.
When you say that, my first thought is Liberty Grove once had the sheriff's department called to a town meeting when it came to clearing the canopy on Garrett Bay Road years ago.
I remember
God.
that.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Denise, can I ask a quick question about the striping notation that you and Nate were discussing?
Yep.
So for the private roads, you're saying stripe the center line for safety purposes, is that?
And the
reason?
side.
Okay, and for safety, is that it?
Yes, yes.
So what would be the difference between a private road and side roads in the village that are public? Wouldn't the same safety benefits apply to striping public
Absolutely.
roads?
Yes.
So
Country lane should be done.
So should we be
Fieldcrest should
limiting
done.
ourselves, should we be limiting ourselves to only inserting some sort of striping addendum to just private roads, or should we make that more wide ranging?
Well, we're talking about private roads right now and
I mean, to not lose sight of this, is this something we
It's-
should keep in mind to return to?
something that Parks should talk about on our
Okay.
next
Great
meeting.
point, Rob.
Thank you.
Although if yeah, that'd take a lot of paint to get Birchwood marked up.
Well, I
Lot of
just,
in the middle of the road there.
philosophically, I'm all with you on your point of view
Yeah.
of, for a private road, it's a benefit. If it's a benefit for a private road,
Oh,
it'd be much
you're-
more of
you're-
a benefit for side
You're in
road.
I'm agreeing with you, Rob. I'm just, I don't know, visualizing them trying to paint Birchwood in front of your house and there'd just be. It's awful porous is all I'm saying, but not that we shouldn't do it.
Okay, so as far as the 13.5 feet, my notes show that when I talked to Chief Hecht and we were talking about driveway widths, and he said, quote unquote, of importance is not so much the width as it is they require 13.5 vertical clearance, so trees and other vegetation don't interfere with emergency access. And so they do that on driveways. So clearly, if they're doing that on driveway, I think it makes sense to do that on a road, in my opinion, as a minimum, but your call.
I think we should try it and see what kind of verbiage you come up with, Julie. And
All right.
and then let us debate the words once they're on paper.
All right. That sounds good.
And do we think the side setback should be at 10 or should it be 12?
I think I should play around with the tree requirement and draw
Okay.
that out
I also-
Okay,
and bring that back.
See how that would impact some of the lots in the village, because that may make driveway placement really tricky, and I would just say, look at a couple example lots to see the unintended consequences.
well, I know that you have to have, unless it's already existing, Because we dealt with this when somebody wanted to split that lot that the Willets used to own, and they wanted to put two parcels. I can't remember, was that Forest, was that Westwood?
Right.
Down there, we brought Randy in, and to break them up, you have to have 75 feet of street frontage for any new lot, was my recollection. So if you have to have 75 feet, then being 10 or 12 off shouldn't be a problem, but we can let Julie play with that.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be a problem. My main concern is nonconformity. What do you do with all the ones that are 5 feet? But let me look at that.
We can't worry about
What exists.
what exists.
Yeah, let me look at it, because
Okay.
if we want vegetation separating lots, it would make sense to push it further from that lot line.
Right.
As long as we're not then preventing from having that one tree every 35 or 40 feet. So I'll play with that one. The last question I have on this one then, you guys, is when you're looking at the zoning code and you're talking about one-way versus two-way traffic, how wide should these private roads be? In my mind, if a 9 foot was a more than adequate asphalt surface, that's what a 1 lane is, and a 2 lane would be 18.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. If you guys are okay with that, then that's what I'm gonna put in these sections as I'm working on them. I mean, we'll revisit them again. We're gonna have to have public hearings on these, but these are tough things we have to discuss now instead of on the floor of a public hearing. So,
Right.
if you guys are okay with that, that's how I'll proceed.
Okay, excellent. We're going to be out of here by 8. That's a welcome surprise. So agenda item number 7, upcoming meeting, next regular meeting and public hearing Tuesday, April 25th at 5:30. We know what we have to bring back.
And maybe I
So,
missed something. What's the public hearing about?
The public hearing is addressing short-term rentals in R2.
Oh, I
It's,
thought last week we decided to put that off for a while. I thought that was oh, that was just a special meeting last week.
yeah, the decision was to schedule it for a public hearing. And the
Oh.
soonest we could get that and make all the notification in the paper and stuff, we couldn't do it for this meeting. There wasn't enough time to get legal notice. And we want to make sure we notify everybody in R2. So
Oh.
it's actually April 25th.
All right,
but I
that's-
think specifically, this is the text amendment that says if you have a development agreement that states that you can have transient rentals and such a date, that's the only part that is in the public hearing.
That is correct.
Are you with me, David?
Well, I'm just thinking about what just happened tonight. The amount of people that are going to show up for that meeting is going to be, we're going to have to control. Well, I guess when we can't control, they're going to speak. There'll be a
You
lot
can
of,
limit the time. You
yeah,
can give so many people so much time per person if Denise so chooses.
And they can only speak once.
Yeah. Yeah, normally it's 3 minutes. You speak once, no debate, give us your public comment, and that's it.
And then I think that maybe we don't want to read the letters of the people that speak. Because we did that tonight.
Yeah, normally we summarize them, and I'm thinking there'll be a lot that, the way the notice is written, that if they have it to us, by the time the packet goes out, you get mailed it or you get sent it. Anything that comes after that gets summarized, and that's it.
Well, I'm saying, like, if somebody speaks and then do we really need to read their letter as well? Because that happened with several people tonight that spoke and had a letter read.
I'd just like to say something real quick about Julie's statement that normally it's 3 minutes and this and that. And I respect how anyone in any committee chair in charge of a public hearing wants to run a public hearing and whatever parameters they want to put on it. But I don't think it's applicable to make the statement across the board normally that people are limited in their time. When I held all the public hearings related to saving the village hall, that ultimately led to the board authorizing the task force to do so, to be formed, I set no time limits on anyone's commentary. And if somebody had a final point they wanted to make after speaking, I allowed it. To me, that was normal. I have no opposition to any guidelines our chair wants to set for this upcoming one. I just want to clarify, we shouldn't
All right, Rob,
pigeonhole people.
She wasn't talking about it's normal for Sister Bay. It's normal across other communities that is the standard.
Yes.
But I think we're all in agreement.
I've
that
been to
Denise-
other public hearings for the
Setting up-
village where it's been announced people
No.
only had 3 minutes to speak, and so that's what I'm talking about, like the marina, the recent hearing on the
Okay,
commercial
okay, get
boats
your
in the
point.
marina. They were told 3 minutes only.
I have a tremendous amount of faith in Denise to do whatever she thinks is right.
Thank you, Nate.
Oh, I don't know.
I guess
Thanks,
what I'm
Ron.
saying is, I don't mind you calling me abnormal, but call me abnormal for a good reason, and that's not one of them.
Okay, I'm gonna make a motion to adjourn at 8:01. Motion by Berto.
You jinxed it,
Second.
Denise. We're 8:01. You said we're gonna be done by 8.
That's because I let Rob speak. That was my mistake.
Okay.
Who
why
seconded
he-
that?
Marge did.
Okay,
I
all those
did.
in favor respond with an eye.
Aye.
Aye.
Hi,
Opposed?
everybody.
Thank you for all
Denise.
your commentary tonight.
Denise, can you hold just for 1 minute?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I